Hey everybody, welcome back to another review, and this time we're going to be talking about the New Teen Titans Volume 3, which collects issues 17 through 20 of the Marv Wolfman George Perez run, as well as the 4-issue miniseries titled Tales of the New Teen Titans. Which we'll talk about Tales of the New Teen Titans in more detail later, because there's a weird history with this book. But whatever, we'll get into more of that down the line. So here is arguably the worst volume so far, and that's not to say it's bad per se. The thing is, the first two had a lot of forward momentum, and this one's kind of a step backwards. What it's trying to do is it's trying to go back and do more stories just with the team and trying to recap some of their origins and playing with who they are a bit more. And that's interesting. The problem is that's this entire volume. Because the Tales of the New Teen Titans 4-issue mini is just one issue at a time. We're recapping these Titans' origins and adding some details in that we may not have been able to discuss prior, like Cyborg's friends, and Raven's education, and Starfire's family, and Changeling's history with his parents and step-parents and such. And we got all that information already, we just heard it, and now we're going to see it. It's that kind of difference. And combined with that are issues that deal with these characters just brooding over things that have already happened. So you have Wally West trying to save one of his friends, whose mother blames her for a car accident that killed her brother and husband, and she's trying to, like, contact the spirit world to get her family back or to take her daughter away, and in doing so she gets kind of possessed with, like, these magnetic powers, and it's a way for, because she has a crush on Wally, it's a way for Wally to deal more directly with his feelings for Raven. And instead of, like, taking an extra step in any direction of that relationship, it's more of him reflecting on what's already happened, what he's worried about, and why he feels bad, which is interesting, and it's kind of a fun, almost horror story adventure, although it's weirdly inconsistent about that, because in places they act like nothing like this has ever happened, and then in other places, Robin's like, well, I mean, after you've seen the Spectre, you've seen everything. And so, like, it's kind of bizarre and atonal in that way. But it's interesting on Wally's side. I feel like Wally's mostly the star of this, because he's got the best issues. But again, not really much forward momentum there. And then there's another story right after that, or, well, before we get after that, the epilogue to this is setting up, what is his name? Dr. Polaris, who, is apparently behind all the magnetic power stuff, which is interesting. And then after that, we have the story with Starfire, not female alien Starfire, but Starfire from the original Teen Titans run, who was a Russian superhero. Essentially what we deal here with is conventional Cold War politics and the idea that everyone just has a bias against each other because they're each other. And so, like, Wally hates Starfire, the male Starfire from Russia, because he's Russian. And he's, like, he's very much representational of the kind of perception Americans had of the Soviet Union. Whereas Starfire is just there to help his fiancée, who's being used as a living virus to set off an infection that's going to kill everyone in the U.S. after her boss receives word that one of his loved ones has died at the hands of an American, and so he blames Americans for that. And so both Wally and that guy represent, like, the two extremes of the Cold War dynamic, and Starfire is caught in the middle with his fiancée. And it's a really interesting story, it's a really good story, and we get more political in the sense that we just talk about actual politics this time, and we have a scene where Wally is like, well, where everyone's kind of ganging up on Wally because he's being unfairly antagonistic towards this Starfire, and he's like, well, I don't attack you guys for being liberals, so you shouldn't attack me for being a Midwestern conservative. And the problem with that logic is that he's not attacking him on the grounds of Midwestern conservatism, disagreeing with Starfire's methods. He's attacking him on the grounds of this guy is bad because he comes from a certain place. He's just being kind of hateful to be hateful. He's not attacking Starfire for say, well, you did this, and that's reflective of your society and why I disagree with you. He's not saying that, he's not disagreeing politically with Starfire at all. He's just attacking him. And I think that's a problem because I think Mark Wolfman thinks he's, writing a story that's very fair and balanced between conservatism and liberalism, but he's kind of not, because the other Titans, which Wally calls liberal, don't really talk politics at all. They don't talk about anything that you can definitively label as a liberal ideal or a conservative ideal, and neither does Wally. Wally just kind of hates communists, and it's weird, and he never goes into why, really, aside from generalities of the time period that really have nothing to do with what this guy's doing. Like, he's very specifically saying, well, I blame you for Afghanistan and stuff like that, but, like, Starfire wasn't talking about that. Starfire wasn't trying to justify any of it. Starfire doesn't even acknowledge what you're saying. He's just on a mission for his fiance. And then they don't know it's his fiance, and they reveal that at the end, and it makes Wally feel bad for the things he's done, but it kind of throws Wally under the bus in that way, because it just makes him look hateful. It does kind of attempt to be a fair and balanced look at liberalism and conservatism, but I think it unintentionally becomes a bad caricature of conservatism. I feel like it's kind of unfair to that viewpoint, particularly because you'd have Chuck Dixon come later, who is very conservative, and he handles that with more flair and more, with a more even tone. He doesn't try to attack one side or the other, he just presents these views and then leans one way, and makes that clear, but it is about the view. It's not just about the two polar opposites. And so that's an okay story. It's not great, though. It does get us more inside Wally's head, and we know that he is a conservative, which is interesting, and we do know that the other Titans, as far as Wally's concerned, are liberals, which is interesting, and you can do more with their relationship and their kind of more antagonism toward each other because of their political leanings. After that, we have a Dr. Light story, which is just kind of nothing. And then we have a Dear Mom and Dad story, where Wally's writing back to his parents, and he's talking about how much they love him, and how their values imparted on him, and how what his path to becoming a hero was like, and kind of recapping the events of the Teen Titans. That's a really good story, and it kind of gives us more into Wally's head and who he is as a person. He is conservative, he is Midwestern, he's very family-oriented, he's the kind of guy that has very strong emotional reactions to things, and he's a lot more... If anyone's ever heard the song The Ballad of Barry Allen, I love that song, and I hate its title, because the title is Ballad of Barry Allen, but it describes perfectly Wally West. That song's kind of somber atmosphere, and kind of how sad it is, and how kind of these powers are a gift, but they're also hell mentality is way more Wally's leaning than it is Barry's in the comics, because Barry's just happy-go-lucky all the time, at least in Wally's view. Barry's the kind of guy that fights crime with a smile on his face, and Wally's the kind of guy that views it more as a responsibility and a crisis of conscience and a crisis of identity. And so that's kind of what his character becomes like this. If you know that song, you kind of know what Wally's track record is here. And so that's interesting. Then you get into the Tales of the New Teen Titans, which is just 4 issues recapping some of the origins. And we talk about Cyborg after his accident and the friendships he's developed, and kind of the extremes of civil rights movements, and where Cyborg falls in the middle of them. We get a Raven issue where we deal more with her kind of forced pacifism, and like that contrasted with Starfire losing the man she loved and being sad all the time, to Donna Troy being kind of more in the middle of both being emotional and being a warrior. You get the Beast Boy issue, which is very interestingly contrasted with Wally, because it's about a person that wanted to be family-oriented the way Wally is, but kept losing his family. And so He's got more of a I take nothing serious attitude, because he doesn't have the luxury of Wally's life. And then you get Starfire's issue, which is kind of a mix of everything, which deals with the warrior nature, which deals with the emotional extremes, which deals with the longing for family. And it's a really good way to bring the whole team together. It does a lot with these different triangled relationships between these people, and it makes them feel more natural. It makes them feel more understandably at conflict, and at this point, the book has defined them as a family. The problem is, it's like 17, 18, 19, 20, and then the 4 issues of Tales of the Teen Titans. It's 8 issues of recapping something or establishing something we've already come to understand. And if this was just all contained within a couple issues, I would be a lot more okay with it. That's just my biggest complaint with this, is that it feels like this volume thematically is good, but plot-wise, narratively, is not very interesting. And again, I just kind of wish you could boil this down to half its size and then keep going with the forward momentum, or incorporate all 8 issues of character work while adding to the forward momentum and the ongoing story with Deathstroke and Hive and such. And they never really quite do that. We do kind of get a definitive answer as to what Hive is, though. Hive just being a collection of super rich mad scientist types, working to a similar cause, but more so like to advance their own aims and such, as opposed to just being like a group of supervillains like the Teen Titans cartoon would have you believe. It's more a evil science business kind of thing. And so it's kind of like stereotypical comic book, but it is different than what the public consciousness perceives Hive as, because of the cartoons and such. So this is kind of skippable. If you want to skim through some of these, I think the Wally West Dear Mom and Dad issue is really good. And if you want to get inside Wally's head a little bit more, read the first issue, which is also pretty good, issue 17. And then the Tales of the New Teen Titans is kind of almost completely skippable unless you want to know more about their backstory. Here's the thing. If you've only started reading Teen Titans, this is a good way to get started. This is a very good breakdown of who these characters are in case you've never read Teen Titans before. It being in the middle of your reading experience of this run, it's kind of problematic, because it's just regurgitation of things you already know. So this is okay, not as good as the book's been up to this point, but then Volume 4 should have more forward momentum, at least I'm hoping so. So thanks everybody for watching. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, whether you agree or disagree with anything I said, whether or not you liked this particular volume, and whether or not you'd be inclined to pick just this one up, just because you want to understand Teen Titans, because I would recommend it for that. Whether or not you're Teen Titans fans, whether or not something like this would resonate with you. Thanks everybody for watching, and I will see you next time.